you think that we still need to showcase? Because there is a lot of hero's journey out there. We all go through. But what are some of the stories that you think need to be shared, whether it's some of the projects you're working on right now, or some things that you would really like to see shot, filmed, and out there to the masses?
I will respectfully pass on this for our esteemed panelists. Come back to you later.
I guess the first thing, just from what's been on my mind lately, is the interconnectedness of our actions and the like.
Wait, I have an idea. Oh, I did it.
Like Greenland just melted, and we're still acting. We're still living our hypocrisies and. I'm not sure what the story is, but that's
I think that's an endless question. I mean, I think there's millions. I think everyone in this room has a really powerful story to tell if they're willing to go where they need to go to tell it. I mean, it's really what you said about being your story. So yeah, I mean, I think there's millions of stories to tell. I'm really partial to one right now. I just want to share about my friend who made a film called Beyond the Chair, which my company is distributing because it didn't seem like it would fit, but it's just one of these stories that blew my mind about a young man who has muscular dystrophy who decided to travel around the world by himself in a wheelchair. And it's probably one of the most spiritual movies I've ever seen in my life, just to watch this young man who did end up taking a film crew, college kids, and they put together this beautiful story about his transformation from basically being told that he's going to die and he should just stay home and die, to going to Taiwan and Cambodia and all these places. And again, this was a profound film, not because the filmmaking was very good, not because the editing was great, although the editing ended up being great. We got an editor to come in and make it wonderful, but just it was life on the screen. It was life on the screen, and it was profound for me because that was a story. So I see that all the time, every day.
What I think we need, any story about truth is freaking awesome. About truth, and I believe there's a truth, and there's a zillion points of light and paths to that truth, but there's a truth. There's a way that this has been designed and the way things work, and if we would just open our eyes, we could see it and discern it. So any film about that rocks me, and I think we need. And any film that's outside of the paradigm already has my attention. By the paradigm, I mean the successful are the ones who they win in the business deal and they get a lot of stuff by the end, or they get the girl and they get. And anyone that, even anything that'll take on our educational system, which is absolutely needs reinvention. It's about this competitive winning model that needs to be reinvented. That's why kids are shooting themselves. It comes out of a stem that is rotten, out of a root that is rotten. It's a stem that comes from a rotten root. So anything like that, I'm excited about. Because education is everything, of course. This is education. Are we not in school right now? Were we not in school when we met each other tonight? Yes. It's all education. So that's it. I just want to see a new paradigm. I'm kind of tired of the old hero stories where someone saves the day. And we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are, so that's how I'm looking at these things, and others may be edified by them. But I'm tired of seeing somebody save the day for society. That's kind of what we're teaching our kids. Someone's going to come along and save you because they're more courageous, or they're able to deal with something that you're not. And these are all projections that have to be reinvented and rethought.
So let's talk about that new paradigm. Did you want to speak to that?
Oh, the new paradigm. I think that's good.
Yeah. So let's talk about the new paradigm a little bit. How does filmmaking look different in the new paradigm? What has changed? What's the new what's the new product or stories that we've talked about the stories, but even filmmaking as an art and storytelling, how has it changed in this new paradigm?
I was going to grab the mic from you because I wanted to actually jump into the conversation that Tom brought up, because I think it's an important one. I think there's a very important distinction to be made. When we talk about, let's take the story, the hero story, let's take for instance. I think there's a really clear distinction that we have to understand, which is, it's sort of been promulgated throughout time that those are stories about other people. You know what I mean? I think that maybe that's the different lens that I would look through when I see a movie about, like, even if I look at the Hunger Games, right? Like, that movie to me it's loaded with teaching metaphors, right? And on the surface, you would look at it and it's like, this movie is about people killing each other. This is ridiculous. But in the same way that, let's say that, you know, she's in a field of 24, you know, and if you were to take, if we go back to some of the great, you know, some of the great metaphors, like the, you know, 12 labors of Hercules and the 12 tribes, you know, of Israel, the 12 disciples around Jesus, the Knights of the Round Table. There's always like this teaching about the 12 around the one, which is essentially the story of the sun going through the zodiac, and that's a teaching that's been around for a long, long time. And in the way that it was done, let's say in Hercules, where he's battling with these, like with the Nemean lion or whatever, you get a story like Hunger Games where there's a different metaphorization of the same story, which is battling through water initiations, fire initiations, air initiations, earth initiations, through the 24 hours of the clock, where the masculine and feminine of each of the 12 all the way around. And then it becomes a really powerful story. And if I can connect the fact that story's about me and my own personal transformation, then it becomes useful. I think, Tom, you're absolutely right when it's like, you can't look at a movie like that and say, well, that's a story about some other hero who's some guy that comes in and saves the day. It's not, I think maybe that's the point of what I'm trying to do. Maybe that's why I'm here. I just realized. It's talking about, like, wait, these are stories about us. Like, there's a way that we, the Adjustment Bureau, when they're up on the rooftop at the end and they open up the plan and there's nothing written, that's the age of Aquarius. That's like, you get to write it from here. There's nothing written. Like, you've made it through the initiations. Now you get to decide. That, when I watch that, that's a story about me and my life. It's not about Matt Damon or whatever, you know. And I think that that's maybe a key distinction to make in the education about storytelling or transformational storytelling that's super important. So,
can I jump in?
Yeah.
I think some are about us. I do, and I think the idea that I think they're about a culture right now that has become lost in an idea that's not working. So when you see all the super movies of the superpowers, you see a culture that thinks we can get fixed by some super thing, like a man who has super strength, or even that's me, I'm going to be. And I look at the people that have, like the mystical traditions that I've also studied, and these were people who gained by reducing. They felt it all by emptying themselves. I don't see that in these movies. I see billionaires who have toys that can save society, and again, I'm coming at it from my perspective, and I recognize that art is an individual experience, although there are commonalities. So others, I am not fully buoyed by these the way I want to be buoyed. I want something new. I just want something new.
But I would say to you guys that, first of all, I think the most spiritual movie ever made was Kung Fu Panda. If you haven't seen it, see it. I won't give it away. Oh, thank you. Can you hear me without that? So I just want to give my spiel as a distributor for a second, because I get the privilege of seeing, and I'm sure you do too, and you guys too, I see a lot of really great films that are answering those questions. And they have nowhere to go because people won't go see them in theaters, because people have become, especially I'll say the spiritual crowd. I spend a lot of time communicating with my fans, and oftentimes I'll hear, oh, I'm going to wait for Netflix. Oh, I should be able to see it for free. There's a huge sense of it. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble tonight, I think, because I'm feeling a little frisky. I don't know what I'm going to either piss off my peeps or wake them up. But, there's a huge sense of entitlement within the spiritual community that for some reason they should get movies for free, or they shouldn't have to pay for it, or teaching should be for free. And what happens is that I'm looking around the room, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've seen 5 cameras. There's probably more. Everybody here is making a movie and is capable of making a great movie, and yet it will have nowhere to go because the audience is lazy and won't go support it. And so it's the truth, you know, it's the truth, because we all think that we should go to a film festival and we'll get to see it for free, or we should be able to go to a screening and see it for free. So, you know, if we actually want those kinds of movies, then, you know, there's probably, what, 60 people in this room. You know, next time an indie film or a film comes out, you know, don't watch it on Netflix. Go to iTunes and buy it. It's $14.99. You know, that makes a huge difference. Then more, I mean, I deal a lot with gatekeepers. I book movies into theaters. You know, I spend time on the phone with the head of Landmark and the head of AMC, begging them to play these films, and they just won't do it because it can't compete against The Dark Knight. But you know, if people actually get up and go buy a movie ticket and take 10 of your friends to go buy the movie ticket, that tide will shift. I mean, the reason that we're seeing all these other movies is because they won't go pay to see your movies. I mean, we all have this sense that we should see it for free. So
this whole conversation gave me an idea that I've been toying with a long time ago, and just what your Synergy TV is. Maybe it's time for a new way of watching movies, not the new movies, because the stories have all been told and we're retelling them, and people love to, you know, love them again when they're good. But maybe it's about coming together in community. One of my favorite ideas was that in ancient Greece, they actually did theater, and then they did dream therapy around the theater. So you would go and watch it, and then they'd wake you up during your REM and talk about what it meant to you, because each theater piece speaks to you. And we're in LA, there's tons of actors, there's tons of creative talent. Maybe it's about doing it in a more communal, interactive way, because the catharsis is there in the stories. I mean, I like new stories too, but I think there's amazing ones out there. But maybe we need a new paradigm of how we go to see and experience the movies instead of individually, and have the dialogue like we're having now after the film.
Can I dive in for one more second? First of all, everything you guys are saying I love. Michael, you're absolutely right on. You guys are right on. I'm going to say something that's the most radical thing I say that my friends don't even understand, so I don't expect this room to understand it. But art has become co-opted into the vision of the world that is corrupt. So we hold artists up as celebrities. So there's a saying from a book I read long ago. It's called The Last Western. No one knows the book, but the saying is this: now art glorifies the artist, affirming the part above the whole. That is why art too serves death. So we as artists are glorified and affirmed as the part above the whole. I'm sorry, I'm the director, I'm the writer, it's my film, I produced it, and you guys are other. That is the poison that we have to see through. And until we artists get that, then we are going to continue to be a part of the problem until we make a level playing field by conscious choices that actually put us on a level playing field. Look, no one, this is not about me, but about the principles that animate me. That's why I've topped my salary. I will refuse to take. That was my poison. When I did these other films, I made $10 million a film or $20 million a film. Now, no, I don't see it that way. If you're serving catering, you are an essential part of this, because I can't move without you, without the strength you give me. And until we see that, until we artists become the art, we're going to continue to generate an art that helps to and I think that's why people are asleep and don't go to movies. I ask this to kids all the time because there are so many good movies. You're so right. But it's not a rational thought when I stand in front of them and say, go frickin' see them. They're too numb. We beat them into an idea that they can't win. There's only going to be one winner in my classroom if I grade them, and he's going to be the one or she's going to be the one going to go to the right grad school and have the right thing, and everyone else is numb. And we artists have to say, fuck that.
Well, I think that, yeah, that's true, but I think that in terms of the kids, actually kids are going to the movies. They're just going to movies, you know, that are more, not necessarily teaching them or giving them this message. They're not going to see, I mean, kids went and saw the BLEEP, or they probably went and saw I Am, but for the most part, they're not going to see these kind of movies, because one of the things that we're not doing as artists is making movies that they might want to go see. I'm
gonna take Sarah, because I know I Am's a movie they want to see. When I get it in front of them, they want to see it. But what they want to run out to is popcorn movies, because they just want to shut off.
Right.
And a film that's like What the Bleep, that makes them actually think and engage, they're too tired.
Well,
they're numb. And when they see it, they'll love it. But their instinct is telling them, you've got to recover. You've got to recover, because you've been so beaten up by this paradigm that we've put them in. You're going to be at $200,000 in debt by the time you get out of the place where we tell you you have to be at to succeed. They're so numb that they just want to go and you can't feed a sick person spicy soup, is the mystic saying. And they just want broth. They want broth.
So what does broth look like then?
It looks like what we're seeing. But look, we're by the way, I'm not a bad news guy. We're evolving, but it looks like broth. It looks like broth.
How do we then take the mainstream messages? I probably
Yes, you need that.
How do we take then these really amazing stories that work in some of the mainstream movies and broaden the market, get the younger audience in, make this mainstream, and what I always like to say is make consciousness cool. I mean, you know, instead of this escapism or popcorn, what do we need to do as a community? Is it a different distribution option? Is it a different way of storytelling? What is it to bring these mainstream movies, mainstream messages through in a way that we all get behind?
I mean, what my first film, Hummingbird, actually teachers have used in the classroom, and I filmed in Brazil, like kids that make their lives look good, and they're like, the 8th graders are saying, wow, my life's not so bad. And I found that that's really nice to reach them, to see the other kids talking about problems that at least mirror or are often worse than their own. I think that's what I like about the international issues. I mean, I spent 8 months in Bangladesh. It made me appreciate being a woman in the West, and I felt like I advanced 100 years. And when people see that and see raining in your household, you know, baby crying and sneezing, they're like, oh, my life's pretty damn good. So I think a lot of it is, and unfortunately, a lot of international films don't make it in the US because people don't want to read subtitles, or, you know, but I think perspective shifts. And but I think this competitive edge or competitive attitude, one of the most profound moments I ever had was when I was living in Brazil, and I talked to a 6-year-old about swimming, and I was like, oh, are you doing swim competitions? And she's like, we don't compete. And my world just stopped, and I was like, why am I even asking that question? Wow, I am so programmed, and the Olympics and this, and so I think you're onto something with getting that anti-competitive, cooperative message out. Somehow it's important.
I think the kids want to, I mean, I think we have to change our language and our messaging. I mean, I think kids are kind of tired of hearing the doom and gloom. We distributed a film called Fuel, and when the film came to us, there was a picture of the world with oil all over it, and it looked really depressing, and the film kind of opened, and it was kind of opening harsh because everyone thought, well, I don't want to go see another depressing movie about the oil world, and it actually wasn't a depressing movie at all. And you know, once we changed the imaging around and put a lighter image on the cover, which is really, it was actually a story about one guy's journey into finding out about different alternative energy. When we changed the poster and we changed the trailer, we took out the dark guy in the beginning and kind of lightened everything up and made it funny. It really shifted in terms of people going to see the film, and it really did make an impact. And so, you know, again, I think the kids are, I think that young people are asleep, but you know, I spend a lot of time working with, talking to young people, and when I speak to them in a way that's hopeful and and inspiring and funny and light and in their language, they respond more to me. I think a lot of the films that are in the mindful media genre tend to be really heady, tend to be really intellectual, and tend to be very preachy, and you know, that doesn't work with young people. And also, a lot of the times, they see the people that are in the movies, like you said, are really living what they're talking. So it's really, I mean, we have to shift our languaging in terms of how we're communicating, because, you know, all us old people, like, we either know it and are failing at it and don't really care, or we know it and we think we got it. We don't need to make any more of these movies for us, really. You know, I mean, I think it's time to, I'm working on communicating to younger people, you know, because that's our hope, I guess.
Yeah, I think Betsy's right, and the theme that I hear in you is something I think we fail to acknowledge in this space, and that is a lot of the films aren't that good and that engaging to a very alive population. While I do believe the kids are tired, they're still alive and they want something, they want something, they want.
They're hungry.
And they're hungry, yes, yes. And the films just aren't that good, and there's a reason. It's really challenging. What we're trying to translate is, it's like trying to describe the scent of a rose. How do you describe what has got hold of you, right? How do you describe what's got hold of your spirit that makes you want to serve? It's really, really difficult. And I just find myself always going back to what it means to be human. So the more human a story I tell, the better. A human being who we can relate to, who has problems like us, who's in this cultural paradigm now and pressured, but who somehow rises above it in the most entertaining, hilarious, I hope in my film, circumstances possible. I don't even like the word spiritual. You know, I speak a lot of people somehow think that I'm this spiritual guy, like, because, you know, when I did Bruce Almighty, and I do have a personal dialogue with God, just in case you... but that would be Morgan Freeman. It's, but, you know, it's like the Catholic Church, which I grew up in, is always looking at films and going, let's describe the films that are the most faith-based films. And they always go to someone wearing a priest collar, or someone wearing a nun's habit. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Jesus spoke in parables. He talked about a virgin, which we don't talk about anymore, or a king, or a landowner, and then he told stories, and they were human stories, and we could relate to them and access them. And I think we've forgotten that a story, like Scent of a Woman was about, you know, prostitution, but it was about the love of a man and a young man, and how they edified each other and grew and that was a beautiful film. But they never called it a faith-based film or a spiritual film.
Right.
Gorgeous. It was a gorgeous film. Forrest Gump's The Meek Shall Inherit the Earth. That's as spiritual a film as you get. You know? So, anyway, just human. Did I mention human?
Yeah. Yeah. I heard it said well recently, it's like the stories that illuminate the humanity in all of us. You know, the shared human values that many of us have. So what does Hollywood, and when I say Hollywood, I mean often the studio executives, what do they need to know about this space? And I'm saying the space because it is hard to label, and we've discussed that we don't have a label for it. What do they need to know about this audience or this market to treat it more seriously, to get more excited? I didn't tell you guys when I started, I apologize, but I've been in entertainment for 10 years. I was at Lionsgate for 5.5 years. I just left in January to do Synergy TV full time. So I've been inside, I've seen a lot inside of the studios, and I'm really curious what you guys think about what do they need to know about the space?
I think on just a basic level that there's a really huge population of people who are interested in this. And you see it sometimes with breakouts, like with the BLEEP. I mean, I don't know how many times I saw that thing. And I was like so excited when I saw it. It was just like everybody I knew was in the conversation. We were all talking about it. And it seems like, you know, everywhere that I look, these are the rooms of people that were, you know, these are people that I see everywhere, and it just doesn't seem to translate yet into, maybe it's people won't put their butts in the theaters all the time, but it feels like it's a really viable audience, and it just doesn't seem to be really served in a, you know, I guess in the way that we were talking about with like information and things that are, you know, really consciously inspiring and things like that. So